I noticed that metaphysics is a mandatory field, as I've been professing for over 10 years, for the greatest thinkers to get into. So if you want to be an agent of change, a captain of industry, a game changer, whatever you want to call it, you have to get into metaphysics. Metaphysics is the power behind understanding and seeing reality. I was actually completely against any degree. I was very much against it because I was like, I want to show the people that you can do whatever the hell you want to do without any goddamn degree. Because I'm vehemently for humanity and I'm a huge fighter for anything that stifles people. If you have a habituation where you're always pronouncing negative frequencies about yourself, that creates a habit. Now it's habituated in you subconsciously to continue to think about yourself negatively and produce negative variables that feed back into the loop, the perpetual loop of negativity. So it's actually extremely powerful. You don't need holistic vision. You can be a millionaire without holistic vision. You can be extremely successful without it. But if you want to be the maximized version of your human self while you're on this planet, it is mandatory. You need this ability. And most people don't have it, and they will never be able to have it for many lifetimes because they're just not ready. They're too goddamn stupid. It's the same concept as the Matrix. All the people around you, you cannot trust them. At any point, they can be an agent because they're still tapped into the Matrix. They're still tapped into the system. Therefore, every person is a potential agent. Most humans across history and those that are yet to come will forever be tapped into the Matrix. They're just so disgustingly embedded into this Matrix, the system, and you can't do much. Not only do people not know what's going on, they don't even know that they don't know.
Welcome to tonight's episode of The Health King's Court. I'm your host, Zach the Health King. Anything that you hear in this podcast is not intended to be taken as medical advice. The thoughts and opinions you hear shared are just that, thoughts and opinions. And any action that you take based on what you hear is done at your own risk. By request of my guest today, I ask that you also turn your attention to the description of this video wherever you're watching it, where you will find his own disclaimer. And with that said, enjoy the show. Welcome everybody to today's episode of The Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. Today we have a bit of an ancient wisdom-oriented episode with an interesting guest. He wears many hats. He is an internationally sought-after global change agent, a scholar, and a doctor of metaphysical psychology. He's consulted and trained over 100,000 people over different industries and in different languages. He's worked with multi-billion-dollar companies, universities, academies, medical clinics, law firms, engineering firms, marketing agencies, law enforcement, and all sorts of different entities. He's a Harvard University published writer, and he's written multiple books. His work has been accepted into the collection of the United States Library of Congress and is used in educational institutions worldwide. Having written over 50 academic, business, and research papers, he's also achieved 6 university degrees. He's been an instructor and a judge at multiple university and academies. He's a business advisor, a mentor, a judge at entrepreneurship events as well. He's a psychological systems consultant for international cyber investigation companies. And he's a distinguished special advisor to international universities. That's a Dr. HermanSJR. Welcome, Dr. Herman, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Zach the Health King. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I thought maybe I'd get through that intro in one breath, but there's no chance there.
No way. And that's the abbreviated version.
Oh God, yeah. All right. Well, we'll need a whole other episode where I properly introduce you. Awesome. So, Dr. Herman, you are a man of many hats. You are a man of many areas of interest, and there's a lot of things that we could get into, and I'm sure that we will get into. But I want to start by defining some phrases that you commonly use in your work, because that could kind of help people set their mental stage for what it is that you enjoy talking about. So one phrase that I mentioned, I believe, in the intro itself, and that I've seen in your introduction materials is metaphysical. And let's just cut it off at that. Metaphysical. I've used that word on the podcast before. I'm familiar with it, but what does it mean to you, and how would you introduce that term itself to the audience?
Sure. The term metaphysical is based on obviously metaphysics, composed of two words in etymology. Meta is a prefix that's Greek. It means above or beyond. Physics is Greek also. It means basically of the physical world, of the physical atmosphere that you see. So that's the specific technical etymological understanding of the word metaphysics to answer your question. However, metaphysics is extremely hard to understand these days because it is ever eroding in an ever decreasing field, ever eroding field, whatever word you want to use, because a lot of things in metaphysics these days and over the last few decades are being taken out of metaphysics by scientists, by academia, by established entities, by saying, okay, that's not what we call metaphysics. And they look at metaphysics as garbage and they attack it and they say it's nonsense and stuff, which it isn't. So they say, well, that's no longer metaphysics. The power of thought or the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, it's not really metaphysics anymore because we understand that it comes from a physical frequency that you can't see, but it's still physical. And it's based on the nanotubules in the brain under neuroscience. So that's kind of understood. So we're going to take that away from metaphysics. Also, meditation and visual affirmation and all that stuff and spontaneous regression of diseases and healing and all that stuff. Now it's being looked at as like, okay, well, that's the power of the mind that falls under the resonance effect, which is a principle under physics. So that's not what they call garbage metaphysics anymore. So we're going to take that out. So metaphysics is becoming a smaller and smaller field. So it's more difficult to define these days, but that's the strict definition based on what the word means according to etymology.
Yeah, and I like your differentiations there because the nerds kind of ruin everything, don't they?
That's me.
They kind of take away all of the real good stuff.
Yes.
And kind of try to usurp the different terms and areas of study with the more, I guess the physical, right? Because they can't necessarily wrap their heads around the meta side of things.
Yes, yes.
And I think having a metaphysical approach to all aspects of study is really the only way to accurately assess and comprehend anything, because this world is beyond the physical, right? To think that there's not more going on than meets the eye is naive at best, right? There's much evidence, even to use that strong term, of things going on beyond what's commonly thought of by the common man. And so you've used the term metaphysical and even in a lot of different areas of your study specifically, and have degrees in metaphysical X, Y, and Z. And so let's kind of talk about a couple of those areas of study. Metaphysical psychology is one that you have a doctorate degree in. How would you take that term and apply it to psychology as a field of study in differentiation to standard, I suppose, psychology?
Yeah, I understand. I hate when people ask me that question because of the answer I just gave. It's like, yeah, it means this, but technically you can argue that, well, that's not physical, really. It's not psychology, really. It's like you said, the nerds, and I'm a proud nerd. I've professed for decades now, but I understand and I agree with what you said. They're like, well, it's not that. That's not right. You said this. It's like, well, no shit. But calm down. That's what it really means. So to answer your question, going to etymology, I've been doing my work for over 10 years across countries, industries, and languages. And I've said for years, don't ever use a dictionary again. No circumstance. I'm not trying to slam dictionaries. Please understand, anyone who works for a dictionary entity. I'm not trying to slam them as a whole in general. However, because what I teach which I call loosely call holistic vision, we'll get into that later, is based on the foundation of whatever you're looking at. Doesn't matter what you're looking at, doesn't matter what you want to do, doesn't matter your background. So it's always better to look at, in management, it's called root cause analysis, the universal, the ground, the foundation, the algorithm, the rule, the concept, whatever you want to call it. And when you apply that towards vocabulary, you always only want to go to etymology because that is the true source of any word. Now, you can argue that etymology changes over time, and that's true, but it depends on what instance of that word you're looking at, and it helps you to understand that word in the most powerful manner. So to answer your question, metaphysical we went over. Psychology, of course, is the study of the mind. So that would mean when you couple those together, it's the study of the non-physical that is beyond the mind. So that's a little tricky for people to understand, more so tricky for people to really engage in because of the first answer I told you. It's like, well, that's not really metaphysics anymore. So because of that reason, I like to keep it loose and say it's basically a very different field than psychology, but it taps into how humans think, or any entity, if you want to go beyond humans, and uses that psychology of entities and couple it with the knowledge of metaphysics. So it's obviously interdisciplinary.
Yeah, and it's an interesting coupling, isn't it? Because
Oh, yeah.
psychology itself as a field is already viewed by a lot of hard science enthusiasts as not real. There's a lot
Right,
of attacking on the field
right,
of psychology as, oh, it's all just a bunch of hullabaloo because
right,
it itself not even a hard thing. Psychology inherently is metaphysical because brain biology is hard, and then
right,
our thought process behind it and the consciousness behind it isn't necessarily tangible. So it's
right.
already viewed as a bit hullabaloo by, whomever. And then when you're taking it even a step further and say, hey, let's even get beyond what standard psychology considers. So it's, you know,
Then they're like, "Oh, you're way out there."
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you've even been able to achieve a doctorate degree in academia in such a specifically out there, if you will, topic. And so that brings me to the question, what got you interested in the, I guess, study or the pursuit of even a whole doctorate degree in such a field? Because those are two different things, right? One, what got you interested in the first place,
Right.
but you spent, I would imagine, much time and effort going down the specific route to get that doctorate. So what,
Correct.
what brought you there?
Correct. I do want to make a differentiation from what you said. I am in academia. I do teach at different universities across the world. I am Harvard published, and I do academic conferences. Uh, but the degree is metaphysical psychology, so there's a difference. So to answer your question, and real quick, I like what you said about the hubbaloo. Sorry, I didn't quite get the word hubbaloo or hubbaloo. Um, and unfortunately, that's true. And then so let's go back to your question. So the initial reason for me to get into this arena, or whatever you want to call it, is I noticed that metaphysics is a grander field in a mandatory field, as I've been professing for over 10 years, for the greatest thinkers to get into. So if you want to be an agent of change, a captain of industry, a game changer, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. You have to get into metaphysics. Now, you can argue that people have not got into metaphysics and they've done excellent. That's true. But if you want to be the grandest of what you could ever possibly be, it is mandatory for you to get into metaphysics for various reasons. So I understood that a long time ago. I said that I'm the definition of a nerd. I'm just constant study, psychotic for knowledge, especially ancient wisdom, because it is applicable to everything today, no hyperbole. So I understood many things when I was a child, and I started to see how the world worked. I remember I was, I believe, 8 years old, and I was watching the show The Price is Right. And I won't go into it now because it's very long, but something occurred when I was watching that TV show, which was my favorite game show when I was a kid. And I was like, that's not how it is. That's not how it is. That's not how the world works. It's not how the answer will come to a human. And from there, I started realizing connections where most of the world doesn't see. So how metaphysics is related to psychology, how those two things are related to culinary arts, which is cooking, how those three things are related to counterterrorism, how those four things, and so on ad infinitum. So that answers the first part of your question. I was just able to see different things and see how metaphysics is the power behind understanding and seeing reality, which, as you said at the onset of this show, everything is beyond reality. And if you believe otherwise, you're biased. And I'm going to be more blunt. You're either an idiot or you're biased. I'm a very blunt person. So to answer the second part of your question, why I wanted to get the doctorate is I was actually completely against any degree. It took me 11 years for me to get my associate's degree, which is the 2-year degree. And I was very much against it because I was like, I want to show the people that you can do whatever the hell you want to do without any goddamn degree. Because I'm vehemently for humanity, and I'm a huge fighter for anything that stifles people. So I wanted to do that. But then I came across different circles and new friends that were PhDs, and they're like, okay, just I understand, but at least get the pedigree, get the degrees, build your name so you can go after those targets that you want to destroy for the people, excuse me, and then train the people and say, look, this is my background. It really does work. I am from academia. I'm from an entity that trains Fortune 100. My entity trains Fortune 100s and various high level people. So that will help empower the everyday person to say metaphysics is real. It's not a bunch of dumb shit. It's not a bunch of hoopla, the word that you said, sorry. So that is what helped me to say, okay, I got my associates. Now I'm going to go psychotic, just bam, 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 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and then the doctorate degree. And sometime before I leave this planet, I'm hoping to get another doctorate, which is going to be a secular doctorate, something perhaps in systems theory or interdisciplinary studies, something like that.
Interesting. And thank you for clarifying that, because that gives me a bit of a window into yourself, right? Because I, like you, have a healthy distrust and distaste for academic institutions. I think they're responsible, or at least play a large role in the degeneration of society's minds at large.
Yeah.
And I do respect, however, the route that you've gone within it, and how you've kind of gone into the belly of the beast to come out with those magical pieces of paper that people still think mean anything, because people do still think it means something. And that tool allows you to navigate this world as you find most effective. So I certainly respect that. That's nuts to me to think of spending so much time in an institution that is nonsense.
Yeah.
But that's kudos to you. I don't know if I would be able to bring myself to do it. I respect it. And I want to back up a little bit, because you touched on etymology. While simultaneously not recommending against using dictionaries, you brush upon the importance of etymology. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart as well, because too many people are unconscious entirely of the spells they are casting upon themselves and the world around them on a daily basis, right? People don't comprehend the language that they're using. And it starts right at the very beginning. How many people start by wishing each other a good morning?
Right.
What is mourning? Mourning is what we do when people die. Why do we want to start with that? Is it not a good day? Right. And that's a rudimentary example, but it starts the conversation of what's going on behind the scenes subconsciously when we use certain words consciously. There's so many interesting things in all languages, but English particularly is a very interesting bastard language that
Right.
I think a lot of subconscious spells have kind of been interwoven into the everyday use of it. And so we don't have to spend too much time on it, but I certainly would encourage people to consider what words they're using that they don't necessarily know the meaning or the etymology of, because they can kind of reveal some very interesting historical events or historical things, and certain words we might not want to use, because although you might not know what's going on, if your body even at an innate level or baseline level comprehends the frequency that is held within a particular word,
Mm.
you might be being done a disservice by certain words that you're not thinking twice on. So if you have any comments on that, would love to hear them.
You got an hour? Yeah, I was for the audience when the Health King Zach and I had a phone call. I said this show needs to be like 6 hours long because it's going to dive into all different things. It's going to bleed everywhere. So yes. So what I teach, I loosely call holistic vision, and I define that as the ability to see the foundations and interconnectivity of all atmospheres. There is never an exception to that rule. If you think, oh, it doesn't really apply here, then that's your fault. That's your limitation. You're not seeing the root level of whatever the hell you're looking at, and you're not applying it right. So given that preface, to answer your question, there's a colleague and friend of mine. He and I did a linguistics slash metaphysical public workshop at a bookstore. It was an occult bookstore, actually, a long time ago. And we spoke about the frequency, no nonsense, the frequency behind words, what's called phonology, a study of phonemes, which is a fancy word of saying sound, basically. So when you say whatever you say, there is a frequency with that sound wave. Every sound wave has a certain frequency. This is not nonsense. I don't deal with an instance of stupidity. I'm very blunt, very much in your face type of expert, and I don't tolerate nonsense. So, speaking strictly scientifically, every word has a certain frequency, and that frequency goes back to your psychology, and it depends on your interpretation of that frequency that pushes you to believe it or not believe it. Like you said, whatever innate understanding your body has of that frequency that you said, that you produced when you said that word, that will help to subconsciously or consciously change you to say, okay, this is a negative thing. It affects me. I am negative, or it is going to continue to be negative for me, or the opposite. This is a positive thing. It's affecting me positively. I am going to be affected positively. And this happens mostly on the subconscious level. So, what does that mean? That means that this so-called nonsense of metaphysics, or whatever the hell you want to call it, that academia says of, or any person says, oh, that's just nonsense, watch your words, don't say you're this negative or you'll never amount to anything. That's very real. So if you have a habituation of that, one instance, two instances, a few instances, it's not going to do anything. But if you have a habituation where you're always pronouncing negative frequencies about yourself, and that creates a habit. Now it's habituated in you subconsciously, usually, many times consciously, though, um, to continue to think about yourself negatively and produce negative variables that feed back into the loop, the perpetual loop of negativity, negativity, negativity. However, if you get that same person and create a deviation, whether it's 1% or 100%, whatever, in a different way, a different trajectory, and say, okay, I am a good person. I am a good person. In the beginning, your mind's not going to believe it. They're going to say, yeah, you idiot, something like that. But if you create the habituation, you're using those frequencies to tap into your subconscious mind that creates a new system in your mind, which translates into in your life, obviously, which then translates into your speech when you notice it. So let's say 6 months later, with just a slight deviation of that trajectory, a slight input of positivity into that negative person, 6 months later, they're very different. Even if that very difference does not equate to now they have a huge bank account, but it equates to I understand. I don't speak like that. I used to speak really debilitatingly for myself, but I don't do that anymore. So, all these tiny variables, such as changing your frequency via speech, via frequencies that you produce that are interpreted subconsciously, they equate to a large output, a large end goal, milestone, whatever you wish. So it's actually extremely powerful. It's not nonsense.
Yeah, I really think it's quite sad how enslaved people are to their own minds in a lot of regards. And I also think it's quite pathetic as well in many instances. It's so commonplace for people to speak negatively about themselves in general because they genuinely think lowly of themselves, perhaps accurately or otherwise, but also on the humor side of things, or the self-deprecating humor. I think it's just so disturbing and disgusting and pathetic. And it's something that you'll casually catch people doing, and it gives you a great insight into who they are as a person. Anytime I hear a man using self-deprecating humor, I don't want to be around that man because you're going to cut yourself down like that. What are you going to do to me when I'm not around or when I want you around me? It's so sad how people can't have their oin mind on their team. This is a scary
Mhm.
world out here. We're
Yeah.
at war, and you're not even going to be on your own side. You're going to
Mhm.
be you're on the enemy side now, attacking yourself
Mhm.
what are you doing, But people know no other way, and people don't think it's important, and they don't understand how important it is to be on your team, and they don't understand how a death by a thousand cuts. Oh, it's just a little thing. Oh, it's just a joke. It's not that serious. But yeah,
Mhm.
keep telling that. Keep saying
Right.
that over time, and you are going to fulfill that prophecy that you are creating for yourself, and you are going to be a nobody. You are going to be stupid.
Right.
And this is an important thing too, because we can recognize unsavory behaviors in ourselves without actualizing them and recognizing ourselves as that behavior.
Of
And
course.
that's where people get caught up. People get caught up because of the overreaction in the opposite direction that is commonly displayed in the unrealistic positivity and stupid optimism of like, oh, I'm beautiful, accept me as I
Right.
am, that
Right.
because there's
Right.
plenty of that, and that's harmful to the psyche as well.
Mhm.
But people will kind of get lost in the sauce of being able to comprehend, ooh, I just did a stupid behavior.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean I am stupid.
Right.
I just did an ungrateful thing, or a bad thing, even. That doesn't mean I am bad.
Mhm.
We can accurately assess ourselves with honesty and what have you without putting ourselves in the negative boxes
Right.
of those behaviors. And that's the part that people are missing because therein lies the actionable. Therein lies how people can immediately tweak their language to a different regard.
Right.
And I think that's very important for people. And so
Yes.
you already threw out a term that is important to you, and I want to go over a little bit more. Holistic vision. We don't have to spend too much time on it because it sounds like it'll be a bit redundant. But it sounds like holistic vision is your advocacy for someone essentially taking consideration of existence beyond what meets the eye at first in all of their areas of life. Would you like to add to the definition of your holistic vision and how you advocate for someone having that?
Yes, what you just said is, of course, true. That is an advanced usage of holistic vision. So holistic vision, I already defined it. So basically, you apply this ability, which is the ability that history's greatest thinkers had. It is the only commonality that history's greatest thinkers had. And you want to use it in every aspect that you can possibly use it. And as I said, if you think there's an instance where, okay, Dr. Herman, I understand, but I don't think that relates here, then that's your fault. You're not seeing things all the way through. So what you just said is an extrapolation of using holistic vision. However, holistic vision is basically, it's similar to systems thinking and what's called consilience. Consilience is just a fancy academic word for, it means jumping together. The etymology means jumping together. So what the hell does that mean? Well, that means you take this field and this field, put them together, and you extrapolate this conclusion. So this algorithm, rule, concept, universal law, whatever you want to call it, in this field, and this algorithm, rule, concept, algorithm, whatever you want to call it, in this other field, you can blend them together and you can use that child of the two in this other arena, this third arena. So it's jumping together. But the thing is, with systems thinking, I really didn't want to come up with holistic vision. I didn't want to come up with something new because every idiot comes up with something new. Yeah, it's the same shit, but now it's my packaging. Now it's under my name. It's like, you're confusing people. You're just adding to the noise. So I didn't want to do that. However, I studied heavily this consilience, interdisciplinarity, systems thinking and stuff. And system thinking is forever the best way to think in history. We have every single study, never has it failed. If you're a systems thinker, you will forever outperform non-systems thinkers in whatever arena. That's a proven fact. But systems theory doesn't really tap into the holism, the interconnectedness of everything else. It taps into what you're looking at, the system you're looking at, plus maybe some peripheral systems, but not the whole. So I was like, God damn it, I didn't want to come up with something new. And consilience is just using two or more fields or variables, I'm going to say, as I said, put them together. It has nothing to do with interconnectivity on a whole. So I'm like, you really need to call it holistic vision. So that's why I use the term holistic vision. And that is the way that history's greatest thinkers thought. If you go out and ask anyone, this is one of the first questions I ever ask anyone that I'm training or consulting. Who are the three greatest thinkers across space and time? There's no wrong answer. And why? So everyone, whether they're speaking in this language, this culture, of this religion, whatever they say, Gandhi, Muhammad, Jesus, whoever, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, that's fine. They'll say whatever, but they'll say something like they saw things differently, or they were able to do things that others couldn't come up with, or they were able to apply certain things that most people can't do across space and time. That right there is the commonality, the only commonality that makes history's greatest thinkers, they're the greatest thinkers. They were able to see the bottommost layer, the root cause, the universal, the algorithm, foundation, concept, principle, whatever you want to call it, of their field, whether they were an expert in one field or 10 fields like Leonardo da Vinci. He was more actually. And they were able to apply that universal in seemingly unrelated fields. So they're affecting stuff that's outside of their arena or landscape, whatever you want to call it. So that is the reason why they're history's greatest thinkers. And that is exactly what I consult and teach on. And I call it holistic vision, the ability to see holistically and deep and all that stuff, according to the definition. And excuse me, and what you said with being able to see things across the spectrum and see beyond the physical world, that is an advanced ability to do when you're able to see things properly.
Why do you think that so many people are either unwilling, unable, or simply do not have holistic vision?
Oh, God. Number one, they are unable to. I've said this for years. Two things. Number one, I say for years across media also, you don't need me. Most people across history never need me. You don't need holistic vision. You can be a millionaire without holistic vision. You can be extremely successful without it. It is only for the people that I touched upon, the people that want to be agents of change, game changers, captains of industry of themselves. So you can be stupidly popular. You can be the next Oprah, Tony Robbins, Dr. Joe Dispenza, whatever. But if you want to be the maximized version of your human self while you're on this planet, it is mandatory. If you want to be history's greatest thinkers, that you have this ability, whether you call it holistic vision or something else, I don't care, but you need this ability. And most people don't have it, and they will never be able to have it for many lifetimes. I'm not going to go into religion or anything, but either this lifetime, if you don't believe in other lifetimes, or many lifetimes, if you do believe in lifetimes, because they're just not ready. They're too goddamn stupid. And it's not necessarily their fault. I'm a very hard person. I say not necessarily because ultimately everything's on you. You can't blame others. So most people can't have it and will not have it. It is a tiny percentage. The ones that do have it, they're able to see things that most people can't see. It's the same concept as the Matrix, the movie The Matrix, when Leonardo da Vinci, when Morpheus is walking down with Neo on these streets, I believe it's New York or wherever it is, and everyone's bumping into Neo, and Morpheus is saying, all the people around you, you cannot trust them. At any point, they can be an agent because they're still tapped into the matrix. They're still tapped into the system. Therefore, every person is a potential agent. And that's true. Most humans across history and those that are yet to come will forever be tapped into the matrix. They can't leave unless some miracle happens and some deviation changes, which you and I and good people hope for. So they're not able to see things. They're just so disgustingly embedded into this matrix, the system, and you can't do much. And I was very angry one day, and I spoke with a colleague, Dr. Noam Chomsky, who, in my opinion, is the greatest linguist in history. He taught at MIT for over 45 years, 45 years, I believe. And now he's retired. He's a political activist. And he and I spoke a few times via email, and I was really angry one day at the dipshittery of the world. And I said, why the hell do we do this shit? Why do we good people even give a shit about these dumb shits on this planet? Oh, I'm a blunt person, man. I don't have time for idiocy. So I said, you give them the answer that they're crying for and seeking, and they say something stupid like, okay, yeah, you're right, and don't do it. Or, yeah, you're right. I'll try that next week when my kids go off to school or when I graduate next year, whatever, some excuse. And he wrote back with the perfect answer that I hated because I can't argue it. He said, it may seem like Sisyphean labor, but it's the right thing to do. So it may seem like futile, like pointless, but it's the right thing to do. And those of you real quick who are into mythology, King Sisyphus is the guy that was damned for all eternity to roll a boulder up a hill. And every time he got right at the top of the hill so he can stop being tortured, it would forever roll back down. And he would have to do it again, forever roll back down. So it may seem like it's futile, but it's the right thing to do. And that's why I try to do this. I work with high level entities mostly. That's where I make my money. But I try to do whatever the hell I can, like you said, from within the beast, kind of like a politician trying to change the system from the inside. I try to do whatever I can for the average person to get information, just like you via your YouTube channel and Ancient Wisdom.
Yeah, and perhaps that is really the only true meaning to life as someone with a soul and the strength to use it. Because in this existence, there's certainly a battle between good and evil. I don't think there's any denying that. And I think more and more people are seeing it because, I mean, how can you not really? And you're either on one side or the other, aren't you? And when you get to a level of comprehension of the way things work, you understand that if you are neutral, you are kind of just on the side of evil because you are kind of allowing
Of course,
them to do what it is that they do, right? There's
of
an old
course.
adage, right? All it takes to be for evil to win is for good men to do nothing, or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah, while it is amongst the most frustrating of tasks to try to make a positive impact on the consciousness of humanity, it is quite meaningful, especially when you do get direct feedback from people whose lives you've touched. And perhaps it's not someone who will ever be themselves a massively enlightened or crazy intelligent, holistic thinking individual, but to hear from people that you know or otherwise that know you, hey, I listened to what you said, and my life is just a little bit better. I'm suffering a little bit less. It's a very powerful thing to hear. It's very meaningful, and I'm sure you can relate to that. And I enjoy your bluntness. I enjoy your honesty because there's not enough of it, and that's really the only raw
Yes.
truth of it. And
Yes.
the dancing around of points doesn't get the point across,
No.
does it? There's some dummies out there, and like you said, I think there's people that are destined to be dummies.
Mhm.
But we live in the age of the concept of all men are created equal. We're all the same. We're all the same. And oh my God, it's just so disconnected from reality and just a disgusting and distraught lie. And that ties into a lot of different directions we can go because, okay, if people aren't all the same, inherently, that means there are people that are better, faster, stronger, wiser,
Right.
smarter, better looking than other people.
Yeah.
And people can't handle that, can they? A lot of people can't handle that perhaps they are just a loser.
Yeah.
That's the game of life. It's a game, isn't it? Everyone knows
Right.
it. There are winners and there are losers.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that being in a position of losing is an eternal damnation.
Right.
But it's easier to cast this facade that we're all the same when you're a loser instead of working to win in whatever realm you care about winning. Because
Right.
it's not even the same for everybody. Not everyone wants
Correct.
a financial mogul. Not everyone wants to be a playboy, with women. Not everyone wants to be this, that, the other, have read the most books or done the most this, that, the other, be the biggest, fastest, strongest. But you have to be doing something.
Mhm.
And it's all a competition, no matter what you're doing. So why not work? Why not work for it?
Right.
So do you have any I have any thoughts? I guess the question could be on the modern perpetuation or advocation that we are all equal as
Yeah.
men.
Yeah. I just had this conversation within the last month with my colleagues in academia. So, where that originally stems from is I'm going to say, the good naturedness of we're all humans, whatever you think we are. We're all humans, we're all aliens from another planet that have come about through panspermia. We're all spiritual beings. At the core essence of every human, we're all the same. We all come from whatever the hell you believe, God, um, Gaia, the universe, whatever. At the core, the root level, we're all the same. So I understand that, but it becomes a very powerful weapon that debilitates a society, whether it's a human society or non-human society, whatever, that is in line with the negative variables that you just said, that you perfectly said. So I don't want people to see this show and be like, oh, Health King Zach and Dr. Herman are against, equality and helping everybody. No, if you say that, you're an idiot. You're not
I'm
listening
just
to the
for
goddamn point.
reality. I'm not
Sorry?
anti-equality. I'm for reality.
Of course, of course. So if you ascertain that, then there's no hope for you. So leave the channel immediately. But
They probably don't have the attention span for my content anyway. So
of course, that's a given. So that's where that stems from, the whatever you want to call it, the good naturedness or whatever of the core concept. But that doesn't work in reality, as you said right now. When you said it doesn't work in reality, and when you said some people are more powerful, some people are more beautiful, some people are more whatever, you can't apply that universal to a society like this. It's the same thing as, what's it called, a zero tolerance. Now, this is controversial, but zero tolerance of any, pretty much any rule. I have to think, but I don't think there's going to be any instance where zero tolerance is going to be good to use in any landscape. Because zero tolerance, if you have, there was a story a long time ago, decades ago, of an A+ student, an honor roll student, who did something really stupid at the school. It was really tiny. In every other day, it would be like, okay, you're punished, go home, come back. But that student got expelled, and they were on the honor system, just exceptional student, because the school had a zero tolerance policy. So because they applied a universal zero tolerance that doesn't work as a universal, it created debilitating effects. And what you're speaking of, equality and everyone's equal, yeah, I understand the concept of what you're trying to argue, the core of for every good human, goodness for humanity. We understand that, but you have to be very careful when you apply it in real world situations. Then you're going to come up with all the nonsense that the Health King Zach here just gave and illuminated it with on the show.
yeah, because it's all hypocritical, isn't it? From that story already, I can deduce with probably 99.9% accuracy what gender and ethnicity that victim of this circumstance.
Yeah.
Because it's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
That was probably a white male, wasn't it? Who said
Yeah.
something that offended a non-white, non-male, and that's it. But simultaneously, at that very university, there's probably grievance occurrences that happen towards whatever that person's gender and ethnicity were,
Right.
of heinous natures, that all of a sudden there's some tolerance for that, isn't there? But that's a whole
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, and this was over 20 years ago at a high school, was on the news. But yeah, you're not off. It was just nonsense. You can't do that.
Yeah, and it really gets to it gets to the realm of, people overreacting and
Right.
really just getting upset when other people or groups are doing better than others, right? And then there's just all sorts of crying and moaning that goes on, and
Of
all this.
course.
And
Of
then we could
course.
talk about the groups that hide in the shadows and manipulate all the other groups, but perhaps
Right.
it's for another podcast.
Yeah.
Do you think that all people, so we've established perhaps that all people are not inherently equal. There's different levels of intelligence, different levels of
Right.
this, that, the other. Do you think all people out there even have souls? Or are there empty vessels walking around?
Okay, this is tricky because it blends into it bleeds into non-physical, because you said all people. So to answer your question, this is where the nerdiness gets in. Well, so you said all people, so it means this. So
All right, let me define people. When I'm referring to
please.
people, I'm saying you look around and you see a flesh entity with arms and that looks
Okay.
like a human. It looks
Okay.
like a person. That's what I'm saying,
Okay.
people.
Okay, understood. Uh, in my research and experience, every human that exists does have, whatever you want to call it, energy or spirit or soul, whatever. However, most humans, as we touched upon, are just stupid to that fact and stupid to their potential that they have within themselves. But I've never come across any research or even theory, actually, or experience where humans exist or people exist without soul, spirit, or whatever you want to call it. Now, I'm not saying that's not possible. I've just not heard of that. So illuminate me if you have heard of such.
Yeah, there's a lot of theory, and I think it's one that I even subscribe to because I think there's much evidence of it. You ever just look in someone's eyes and nobody's home, and
Yeah,
you talk to
I
them
understand.
and they have zero actual thinking ability.
Yeah,
Perhaps
yes,
it's just what you're referring to or would refer to as the bottom of the barrel stupid person.
yes,
But it really appears, and I think that there's people out there that genuinely don't have cognition beyond programming. I
yeah,
think there's people out there that genuinely are not on the side of good, they're not on the side of evil, they're not even really existing at a
right.
metaphysical level at all and don't have the capacity to do so. They're just kind of walking around making this
Yeah,
place look real. And this gets into the concept they're referred to often as NPCs. Are you familiar with
right, right. Yes, yes, yes.
so it's like when you're playing a video game, there's the character that you're using and the
Yeah,
people on
Avatar.
your team. There's the bad guys, and
Right.
then there's all the randoms walking around because otherwise that map would not look real or would not look
Yeah, yeah,
believable or it would just
yeah,
be strange.
yeah,
And I honestly, the more I look around, the more I think there's people that are like that. They genuinely are just nothingness. There's nothing going on. That doesn't mean they're bad. That doesn't mean to
right,
treat them poorly.
right.
I just think that they have no connection to a soul. Now that brings us to the question, were they born a soulless individual or did they spawn in around the corner before they walked into the frame? Or
Understood.
did something happen or did a series of things happen along the way in their lifetime that disconnected them entirely from their
Yeah,
soul, and
yeah.
perhaps they can't come back. Whether that is severe emotional trauma, whether that is physical poisoning that has detached their physical vessel from the spiritual side of things. I don't know. Perhaps there's cases of both, but the more I look around, the more I talk to general public, the more it just is evident that
Yeah,
there's just people walking around that aren't even people anymore, and it's sad. It's sad,
yeah.
but I think there's people that there's no hope for, even in that regard, perhaps within this lifetime.
I The only thing that sucks about what I'm about to say is that you have hit so much crap right now in so many arenas. We need an hour to talk about this one statement, this one question that you have, which is really cool because I love the nerdiness of it. And it's not nerdiness of like, okay, only highly intelligent people can understand and it's boring as shit to the general person. No, it's immediately applicable, real world issues that what you just spoke of addresses and affects. So, first of all, going back to the Dr. Noam Chomsky, the PhD in linguistics. So I asked him to use a quote in my second book, and he said something like, and he allowed me to use it. I think I was grateful. So he said something like, not only do people not know what's going on, they don't even know that they don't know. And that's disgustingly accurate. And I wish to hell I could combat it, I could argue it. So that speaks about what you just spoke of. And then, yes, I have absolutely, unfortunately, absolutely, since I was a child, come across dumb shits who just, as you said, you see it in their face. They don't know what the hell's going on. They just function on a primal level, a programmed level, whatever word you want to call it. Also, I'm trying to hit everything as fast as possible very quickly. Also, there, if you go with the hallucination theory that the world is a simulation and stuff like that, yeah, you can argue that some, I'm going to say, human entities may have been created. I don't want to get weird here, but it's this is fact. I'm not speaking nonsense. may have been created for this program without a spirit, soul, spark, whatever word you want to call it. I don't know, but that is possible, yes, especially with simulation theory. Also, when you do anything, speaking scientifically, you want to be very careful with your words, obviously. When you analyze any system, first, you have to define all the variables of that system. So, and you have to be very careful. So, you said something like metaphysically, they don't have an energy, or they don't metaphysically, they don't exist, or something like that. If I'm completely off, correct me, but it was something like that. Metaphysically, they don't exist, or something like that. They're not real, or something. Uh, Very similar to when someone asks me, do you believe in God? Before I say anything, I say, what's your definition of God? Because I may be talking to someone that believes God is Satan, or God is Gaia, or God is Jesus, or whatever. So you first had to define what the hell system you're engaging about, or engaging with. So I agree with what you said completely, that there's so many people that just look like they're not there. They're so divorced from whatever you want to call it, reality, metaphysical truth, that they're just not going to get it either, ever, or at least after many lifetimes, if you believe in the reincarnation theory. So I agree with you, but those people still, unless we're talking about simulation theory, those people still have souls, or sparks, or energy, spirits, whatever you want to call it. It's just that they're just, that soul, spirit, energy, spark, whatever, is so disgustingly encaged that they will almost never be able to access it in reality. So, like you said, you look at someone, they got the deer in the headlight look at you, and you just see that they're not all there. If it's not simulation theory, because that is a real probability, an entity that's created and it really doesn't have a soul, then they're just so divided from that. It's the same thing as the pineal gland with all this fluoride and disgusting chemicals and stuff, and other things. The pineal gland is calcified in almost every human across history. Sorry, not across history, in newer times after the 1900s. So, in order for you to tap into this, whatever you will call it, spiritual energy, metaphysical energy, whatever, it is extraordinarily helpful. It's not mandatory, but it's really helpful if you open your pineal gland, if you decalcify it. So, the people that you're speaking of, where they're just not there, they're so calcified against their own energy, potential, whatever you want to call it, spirit, whatever, that it is not going to goddamn happen. Not either forever or after several lifetimes.
Yeah, and that ties into what I was mentioning of, were they always like this? Were they born
Right.
like this?
Right.
But even in the were they born like this, that brings into the question, were they destined to be born in such a state, or did they inherit so much toxicity and bad health
Right.
in utero that they ended up being birthed like this? And that's a very a very diverse thing right there in
Right.
regards to our state of health and our state of our DNA, and then our state of decisions that accrue as we have a child and as a child
Right.
is in womb, and etc.
Mhm.
Uh, Interesting. And so something else that you mentioned was God, and you kind of gave some different definitions or possible ways that God can be referred to. What do you think is the role of God in a society? Is it
Oh, wow.
necessary? Is he beneficial? Is he detrimental? Whatever God means to a society.
I understand. I'm laughing because it's another beautiful question that can take a long time. So, of course, I mean, God is subjective. One can argue that no, it's not subjective. God is objective. But then they're going to be a hardcore, I'm going to say, religious person, whether they're religious of the religions that we know today, or they're just religious in their heart. Religion doesn't always necessitate to a faith. It means something else etymologically. So to answer your question, I mean, is the concept of God mandatory? I don't like the word God. I almost never use it unless I'm engaging with someone. Yeah, you know where we're going. We're going to be like, "Oh, you said this," so I don't like that word. But is the concept of God needed in a society? No, it's not. If you're talking about a human-like God that has appendages or seemingly has appendages like, Jesus Christ is portrayed or anything like that, it's not necessary. As a matter of fact, if you're a Gnostic, you believe that God is actually evil. That's a different conversation. The concept of God with wanting to always better yourself and stay away from evil, that is mandatory for humanity or for any society, whether it's human or not human, to function in a quid pro quo, a symbiotic relationship where it's beneficial, basically, where it's a cycle that's a positive feedback loop. So, for example, I help Health King Zach, and he in turn helps me. We help each other, and we in turn help someone else who's poor. That person helps someone else down the street because of whatever. And it's a symbiont connection, positive feedback system. So that is definitely needed. Whether you call it God or you say it's a force or you don't call it anything, you just say that's just how things should be. That concept is definitely mandatory if you want to establish and perpetuate a positive atmosphere. That atmosphere, again, being a human society or non-human society, or even a cat society, whatever. But is it mandatory to have religion come into the picture, established religion come into the picture? No, it's not mandatory because you can do that without such variables. And religion is quite fluid and it's very subjective and can be interpreted in different ways, which is a lot of how humans have screwed up using religion, such as killing people in the name of God and everything like that. So I hope that helps with the answer. It's very based on etymology and science, and we define this, this, and this, but I say it's not necessarily needed as far as the word God, but the concept is what's needed of good and evil.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and it's something that, or it's a topic that I've had an interesting relationship with over my years as well, because I was raised in with a religious mother, and so the word God was used, and I was brought to religious institutions, etc.
Mm.
But I got very turned off from the concept of God, and at the age of 13 started self-describing as an atheist. And so to me, I was too smart for God. I thought, that doesn't make sense. That's not logical. How could that be? And a large part of that was how I saw the name of God being misused and abused, and people doing all sorts of stupidity in the name of assorted religions and what have you. And so I got very turned off. And then a bit of my journey has been, as I got older and actually wiser and more intelligent beyond, a 13-year-old's level of cognition, I realized that the only intelligent take is that there is something, right? There is
Right.
metaphysical. There is stuff going on. And I guess you could say aligned with the new age terminology a bit of talking about how the universe does this and the universe
Yeah,
does that,
yeah.
which is again just another name
Right,
talking about the same thing. And
right.
then some time goes by, and then I realize, okay, I am talking about what is colloquially referred to as God. I am just triggered by that word
Right.
because I've been so turned off by it. So now the way I stand on it is we know what we're talking about. It can be referred to as God. So what I say is let's take back the term. There's a
Hmm.
lot of people throwing out that word in a willy-nilly way. But much
Right.
like you go into the belly of the beast in academia and try to use those tools as a positive thing, my philosophy is I'm going to use that word and refer to it as I feel appropriate, not necessarily to be a prophet or anything, but let's try to use that word in a healthy regard in combating the unhealthy use of it. Because to introduce concepts that people don't have any sort of label for is harder than
Right.
that innate, okay, I understand that word, but
Right.
perhaps that's a nicer use for it. And so
Right.
that's my philosophy towards it. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But I agree with you in the sense that when we're talking about the metaphysical or the existence beyond the physical, it's all kind of the same thing with different words.
Right.
It's we could call it the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
We could call it the ether. We could
Hmm.
call it the universe. We could
Right.
call it God. We could call it Gaia, Ja, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeshua, whatever, whatever.
Right.
But it's kind of just different brands or different labels and descriptors of the same thing.
Right.
Where it gets a little muddied, of course, is when people start referring to human entities as God or Son of God, and that's a messy thing itself. That's
Right.
something I never quite understood. Referring to another man as God, it kind of disturbs me. It's very strange to me, but I respect it, of course, if people use
Yeah.
it in a positive way.
Of
But
course.
that's something that's strange to me, akin to people running around in sports jerseys with other men's name on their back. I think that's strange behavior, but
Yeah.
again, another
Well,
episode.
well, I'm the definition of a nerd, so I hate sports. So I'm with you. Whatever you say against sports, I just can't stand sports.
Yeah, sports again, a whole other topic, but yeah, sports are most sports fans are themselves just nerds pretending to be cool, right? Wow, bro, did you see, LaDainian
Yeah.
Tomlinson's
Yeah.
statistics? He got 4 touchdowns and 3 receptions. And
His RBI was 4 last year, and yeah.
as they sat on the couch in front of a screen,
Yep.
just like
Yep.
a nerd at the computer that they make fun of.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear, when I say nerd, I'm having fun with it, right? And we can all
Of
understand what
course.
I'm
Yeah.
saying. But I have a respect for people that are intelligent and are students and scholarly and whatever. That's a
Yeah.
separate thing than
Right.
someone being a nerd.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct. Yeah,
So
of course, I
to
understand.
be clear,
I understand. I just had a conversation. This will just take 1 minute. I just had a conversation with someone at a cafe last week, and he was an engineer. And he and I just sat down, started talking with each other. We sat right next to each other, and we were talking about sports. And I said, not everyone's going to subscribe to this, but I said, I've been saying for years, sports is just you're just watching a bunch of rich idiots play with a fucking ball. It's like, why are you, why are you wasting your time with that? And it's preferential. It's not right or wrong, but I'm like, all you're doing is watching millionaires play with a ball or some object.
Yeah, and that has a tinge of being against the sports players. I have nothing against the sports players who are capitalizing upon it all and are themselves being athletic phenoms because I respect athletic ability and athleticism, and I think being strong and fast and capable physically as a man, particularly, is an essential part of the male experience. But that's a separate thing than watching others do it.
Yeah, yeah,
I have
and that's what I
respect.
really.
Yeah, I have
Sorry.
respect for the players. It's the viewers who don't themselves do anything physical or just spend their time watching the others.
Yes,
That
yes, and like you mentioned about, you know, people that are NPCs or whatever you want to call them, and they don't metaphysically exist or have a metaphysical energy or whatever word you want to say. It's the same thing with me. I'm never against a human because I'm vehemently for humanity. But in my opinion, I guess not right or wrong, but in my opinion, one reason why I don't like sports is because if you're just sitting on there, now, if you want to be an athlete, that's cool. But if you're just sitting down, wasting so many years of your life, like you said, being a sports nerd and just watching millionaires play with the ball, it's like, well, then I'm like, I'm not going to be doing
Yeah.
that.
And then when people get emotionally invested in,
Oh, yeah.
what's
Yeah.
going on, and then, oh my God, you're just a loser.
Yeah.
That's really going to shake it up. And like that said, I enjoy a good highlight reel. I like seeing awesome
Okay.
catches or crazy tackles or
Okay.
an awesome throw. I like that. I'll catch a highlight reel as I'm, on the toilet, but I'm not going to spend hours or even minutes of my time
Right.
otherwise when I have important things I could do or find to do that
Yeah.
advance my life and then just watch a bunch of people doing stuff. And there's all sorts of excuses that'll be
Right.
made, but oh, it's time with to unwind or relax or hang out with the guy. Nah, you could be doing that in some actual productive way. But
Correct.
enough about sports. I would love to have you back on for another session. I think next time we book a session, we will book for a longer time period. But I do have
Yeah.
approximately 7 minutes that we could use to wrap up
Okay.
here. So let's how do we use such a 7 minutes? Are you we touched upon it briefly, but are you someone that is looking to be contacted by someone after they hear you? If someone really likes what
Oh,
you said here today, or they enjoy your way of thinking and they know that you are someone who perhaps coaches people or entities or companies, how would someone get in contact with you for some sort of work?
sure. So the most, like I mentioned, the majority of my revenue comes from higher level entities, but I'm very much for getting this information out to the people. So to answer your question, there are many ways to get in touch with me. You can just Google my brand name, Dr. HermanSJR, and everything about me will come up. Also, you can go to drhermansjr.com. You can go to Linktree/Dr. HermanSJR and a few other links. So if you forget any link, just put my name into Google. Everything about me will come up, all my books and everything. And I do have games that I have for sale that are cognitive revamping, where you go in and you beat the hell, you completely destroy your entire thinking foundation. And I mean that. You completely destroy and build a new one. So I have games that allow you to do that. I have workbooks that allow you to do that. I'm working on my 11th book right now. I have sessions where we do it together one-on-one or recorded. I have courses where you can do it. So various methods that I use for those higher level entities, I like to make available for the everyday person that wants what you just said. Hey, Dr. Herman, I like his crap. So I want to get in touch with him and, learn to see things holistically.
Interesting. So when you say games, is it like a video game, like a work along game? Like what's
No, it's actually, this would be great if we do a second show. I'd be happy to do such. It'd be great to dive into. It's a game on psychological tarot. Please understand, I do not believe in tarot, but I
what
use it heavily as a non-clinical, non-clinical, non-medical psychological tool. I'm a doctor of metaphysical psychology, but I'm not a medical doctor. Nothing I ever say is ever medical advice. But the tarot is one of the best tools I've ever come across in history to revamp your brain, to revamp how you think and see the world, to reveal biases, opportunities, issues, what's called SWOT analysis and management: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So I use that when I train doctors, lawyers, managers, various entities, and they say, okay, what the hell is this tarot? What are you doing, Dr. Herman? I'm like, no, it's not what you think. I don't believe in tarot as a prophetic tool or divinatory. Not that I'm saying anything negative for those that do believe in it. Please understand, I just don't. So that is what the game is about, using psychological tarot in very fun ways. It's a 4-hour game that you do with me to reveal your biases and beat the hell out of your mind.
interesting. And just for clarification purposes, not to do a disservice to the field of study or how you use it, but the word you're saying is tarot, as in colloquially used in tarot cards.
Right.
You are taking
Yes.
those kind of concepts or the way that those kind of things operate, applying it in a particular way that
Yes.
allows you to accomplish a goal. So that game is something that someone would purchase
Right.
as an individual, and then they work one-on-one with you, and you play that game with them to
Yes.
help them kind of work through themselves.
Yes, but please understand that I'm just the last phrase that you said, not work through themselves clinically or medically, of course, because I'm not a clinical or medical doctor, but work through themselves with destroying how they see. So revealing their thinking patterns, their cognition, their cognitive schema, as it's called in psychology, and destroying it and putting in a brand new one. So real quick, you can use a tarot card. You can use it as what's called a Rorschach test, founded by Dr. Herman Rorschach. You know, the ink blot test, where it's a white card, but you see a mash of black ink, and you say, "Oh, I see a clown. I see a bunny. I see a cloud." You can use that with tarot cards and other things. It's much more deep than that, but similar to
Interesting.
that.
So it's not a clinical thing, it's not a medicinal practice, but you might learn a thing or two. It's a bit educational, a bit entertaining, and it's an interesting experience.
Oh, it's extremely educational and entertaining and very revealing. It's very in depth, very invasive. The stuff that I do is extremely invasive, deceptively simple. So you swear it's easy, but it's actually extremely complicated and very complex because it's going to make you uncomfortable. If I don't make you uncomfortable, I'm not doing my work right because I have to work against your subconscious mind, which is immediately going to work against me. So I have to help you destroy it and work against it very deceptively.
Very interesting. Sounds like a good bit of fun. But
Yes.
there's a lot of topics that we covered. They're all related because all things are, of course, related, as we know.
Right.
But in our closing minutes here, is there any particular message that you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers off with? Anything that you'd like them to really have come away with from this conversation?
Yes, I've said this many times at the end of media. If you forget everything I ever said and Health King Zach ever said, remember the word divorce. Fall in love with the word divorce. I've said that for over 10 years to many entities. Make sure that you forever divorce from every atmosphere you're ever in. So you could step outside of yourself, just like taking a goldfish out of water and showing that goldfish that there's a whole nother world that exists outside of that water. Divorce from yourself and see a better solution of whatever the hell you're trying to do, or to see a worse issue, a grander issue that you have to fix better than what you see when you're in that atmosphere. So forever divorce from yourself so you can start seeing things and thinking things in ways you couldn't possibly contemplate. And that's exactly the holistic vision that I teach.
A very interesting advocation using a dirty word that has been demonized in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
no, it's a fantastic closing message because stagnation is death.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as staying in the same place, I believe. I believe we are either progressing in any given moment or regressing or withering away or really dying. And so too many people are out there feeling stuck in
Right.
some regard or another, whether that's, well, most obviously that comes to mind is a relationship, but also in a career path or a work path, or a way of thinking or a state of physical being, whether that's weight or strength or anything, whether it's in a state or geographically. Change can only occur when you are willing to change and willing to let go of certain things. You must make room for the life you want, and that involves leaving behind the life you know. And that's a very scary thing for a lot of people, but the more you take calculated leaps of faith, the better perhaps your life will become. So thank you for leaving off with that message. I do look forward to having you on as a next session. But for now, Dr. Herman, thank you very much for coming on the show.
And thank you, Health King Zach. I appreciate it.
And just like that, episode 21 of the Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health, comes to a close. Dr. HermanSJR is a super interesting guy. I'm very grateful to have had him on the podcast, and it's very likely that he will be joining me at some point in the future again. Be sure to check out the links in the description to see his assorted content and websites, etc. As always, ZachTheHealthKing.com is where you'll find me. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of very interesting episodes coming your way. Next up in line is one on obesity, then one on psychology, then on the divine union between masculinity and femininity, to intuition, to a women's relationship coach, to psychiatry and mental health, etc., so on and so forth. At the time of me saying these words to you, I have 26 episodes already recorded, waiting to publish when I have time to edit and publish them for you. So do stay tuned, because there are plenty more where this came from.